In this video we're going to DCOA the Umarex Smith & Wesson 686. That's strip, clean, lube, reassemble, and while we've got it apart we'll have a look at a few of the common problems and the fixes. First thing to do is strip the gun, take the grips off, then the rear sight. Take the front screw out first, then the rear elevation screw, and that comes out with the sight. That reveals the side plate top retaining screw. Take that out, then remove the two side plate screws. There's nothing scary inside the 686 that's going to leap across the room, so if the side plate is just a little bit tight, protect the finish of the gun with a piece of plastic or card and just wiggle it and lift, and off it comes. We'll have a quick look at the bits in the side plate. There's the mag advance pole. This is what turns your magazine. It's the top edge of that that's critical. If it's not nice and straight and clean, if there's one corner of it worn off, if you're having problems with mag advance, that'll influence it. This bit needs replacing if there's visible wear on the top edge of it and it's not working properly. There's the spring behind it that controls its movement. There's the crane spring here. When you press the thumb latch, this is what just pops the crane out slightly to allow you to get hold of the magazine easily and pull it out. There's also the mag locking hand. This locks the mag in position while you're shooting so that the pellet lines up with the barrel when the hammer strikes the valve. Under that there's a spring, and then there's the pin that it pivots on. This commonly works loose, and you can just put a bit of retaining compound around the end of the pin, push it back level, let the compound set, and that'll retain it. But because it's just retained on the outside surface here, you can still pop it out from the back. You might need a drift and a light tap with a small hammer, but you can easily sort that out. And that's one of the most common problems with this 686, the side pin drifting out. We'll have a look at one of the other ones later in the video. And now we're going to strip out the internals. We'll start with the gas valve, transfer tube and piercer unit. Mag advance lever actuating bar. Lift the hammer out as a unit, and that's pretty much as far as you need to go to clean it and lube it. I am going to pop the trigger out to show you the cause and the fix for the other most common problem with the Smith & Wesson, and that is the mag advance lever operating pin just migrating slightly inwards. I'll just pop the trigger unit out. There you go. Sometimes it comes out with the pin in place, sometimes it doesn't. You're going to want to take the pin out anyway, because to put it back in, you push the spring into position, have the pin all the way through, out of the back, and level with the front surface. That'll help you when you're putting it back together again. If this little pin that actuates both the hammer bar and the mag advance bar, if it starts to move inwards, it slips under this bar and the trigger feels heavy, the hammer still moves, the mag advance doesn't work. All you need to do is push it out slightly forwards, put a little bit of retaining compound around it. Hold the bar in place. Use something flat and solid, just a bit of metal, to push it level so that it's exactly the right level to drive this bar, not sticking out to catch on the inside of the side plate, and still has enough sticking out the back to run the hammer bar. Let it set, and that will permanently fix any problem you have with the drifting pin. Right, assuming you clean up any parts as you go, you're going to want to put the trigger back in again. If you just introduce it at an angle, the spring will jam against the inside of the frame. All you need to do is lift the spring with a small screwdriver or a pointy tool so that it rides up onto the inside of the frame. At the same time, apply firm pressure to the pin and push the spring all the way to the back. That's your trigger in nicely. The next piece you want in is the hammer bar. At this point you can quite easily pop it round the back onto the pin. Then you can put the hammer back in. Make sure that you get this piece of the hammer between those two sections, plus if it's above the trigger you'll have problems and it won't run properly when you've done. We can then put in the Mag Advance actuating bar, and slip in the valve unit. Sometimes the front end of it comes off the valve, sometimes it stays with it. If it comes off it, the only thing you need to do is be careful to keep the front edge pushed back firmly backwards as you're introducing it, so that both the front and back edge drop in at the same time. If they don't, it goes at a slight angle, it can jam up. Assuming you've cleaned everything before you put it back together again, well, just have a look at the lube points. You want either a moly grease or, better still, a moly paste all over the ends of these three parts here, the pointy bit on the back end of the hammer, the toe on the trigger, and the sear for single action shooting, and also the bottom end of the double action actuating lever. And then you want a nice oil on all your pivot pins and just a little bit anywhere else where there's moving parts that you don't need grease. Then we're ready to put the side plate back on. Make sure that that little spring is sitting at 90 degrees to the plate. You can just dip the bottom of the spring in a little bit of grease and that'll retain it in there. That's what the factory do and that's what I do. Pull the hammer gently back and push the hammer bar against it. That's to clear the mechanism on the inside of the frame. Pop the side on, and then you're ready to put all the screws back in again. Replace the side plate screws. Don't fully tighten side plate screws until you've got all three in position. But when you've got the two side ones in, holding the side in place, this is the time to check that everything works. Nothing worse than getting the grips and the sight on and then finding you've got something slightly out of place. Put the top screw in without dropping it, hopefully. And tighten the side screws. Refit the rear sight. grips on. And she's ready to go. Hope you found this quick guide on the 686 disassembly, lubing and reassembly useful. If you've got any questions, pop them in below and I'll get around to answering them for you. And thanks for watching.